Today, Finance Minister Grant Robertson joins me to provide a clear outline of the way in which we will approach the remaining allocation of the COVID Response and Recovery Fund. It's now becoming clear our moves to go hard and early in the fight against COVID-19 are paying off. The types of investments we are making are only possible, though, because of the discipline Minister Robertson demonstrated in meeting budget responsibility rules and reducing debt below 20% of GDP early on in our term. That low debt has given us considerable headroom to invest and stimulate the economy to protect jobs and business. We will not be a government of austerity because we know about the detrimental effects on future generations if we do not look after New Zealanders now. But we also know this is debt that we will have to pay back. And that is why the budget already has a debt repayment plan in it by investing in our people, growing jobs and growing our economy. We're making sure we are balancing the need to invest in businesses and to support households through the worst of the COVID economic hit while keeping debt as low as possible and keeping funds in reserve when it is needed, such as in the event of any potential resurgence of COVID-19, which we must continue to need to be prepared for. The current lessons from looking around the world is that this global pandemic is ongoing, that we are one of the few countries not to experience a second wave or uptick in cases, and second waves are driving some places back into costly lockdowns. Early on, we stated that our best economic response was a strong health response. Going hard and early to beat the virus and the success of our team of 5 million means that we are opening up our economy faster than others. Growing our economy will give us the ability to pay back the debt that was needed to fight this virus. I'll hand over now, though, to Minister Robertson to make an announcement on our approach to debt management and our general approach when it comes to the COVID Recovery and Response Fund.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Governments around the world are investing in their economies with fiscal stimulus at unprecedented rates to try and fight the global recession caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The New Zealand economy is currently doing better than predicted. The New Zealand Activity Index was only down 0.9% on a year ago in June, led by growth in electronic card spending and heavy traffic movements, as well as we've recently seen expansion in the manufacturing and services sectors. However, this good progress in New Zealand is contrasted with the rest of the world, which is not in the same position as we are at this stage. The global recession and global economic activity over the next few years are set to be worse than forecast. Our first stimulus package, announced on March 17th, was one of the largest in the world at the time. This and other fiscal stimulus measures we have taken, like business tax cuts, investments in jobs and training, and in shovel-ready infrastructure, will continue to flow through the economy in the coming months. We have taken a no-regrets approach to this investment, and I stand by that decision every day. We are also fortunate that New Zealand went into COVID-19 with one of the lowest government debt positions in the developed world. Post-COVID, we will remain with one of the lowest debt positions in the developed world. The budget estimates our net debt to peak at about 54% of GDP. This is inclusive of all of the investments we are making to respond, recover and rebuild, and it is also inclusive of the debt repayment plan already set out in the budget. The average for advanced economies when it comes to debt before COVID-19 was net debt of around 80% of GDP. The UK went into COVID with net debt already above 75% of GDP. In the US, it was more than 90%. In Ireland, it was 40%. We started with net debt below 20% of GDP, and at our peak, we will remain lower than when most of our peers started. Our investments are being funded through the COVID Response and Recovery Fund announced at Budget 20. However, the $50 billion in this fund is not a target. It is an envelope of available spending. Our significant stimulus and investments prior to and including Budget 2020 meant that $20.2 billion remained available in the COVID Recovery Fund on Budget Day. Since the budget, we have announced a number of important investments, including $570 million for the COVID income relief payment, an extra $700 million for the wage subsidy extension, and more than $300 million to keep supporting our health response, including the $150 million for extra PPE announced at the end of June. As I outlined to Parliament on the 30th of June, these and other investments meant that at the beginning of July there was about $17 billion remaining in the fund. The need to support the ongoing health response while putting in further measures to support the economy to recover and rebuild means that Cabinet has decided another $3.2 billion from the COVID fund will be required to meet our response. This includes the $760 million already announced for the Three Waters reform, which will generate infrastructure investment and create jobs. Detailed announcements about the remaining investments will be made over the next couple of weeks before the House rises. Our responsible approach to managing the government's books pre-COVID remains the same. We want to ensure stimulus spending is targeted and creates jobs now, and we want to manage debt as tightly as possible and stay prepared for any future rainy days. As we look around the world, as new waves of infection hit, it is essential we remain ready for all possibilities. So today I am confirming that the remaining $14 billion in the COVID Response and Recovery Fund will not be spent prior to the election and will be set aside to make sure it is available in the case of any future rainy day related to COVID-19. This means we have money in the back pocket if we need it, including if a future lockdown is required or the outlook for the international economy continues to get worse and further stimulus is needed for the economy. If it's not needed, the money will not be spent, it will not be borrowed, and we will have less debt to repay. This is the fiscally prudent thing to do. Avoid taking on more debt than is necessary while holding some cash in reserve in case we need it. COVID will be with us for some time, so the wise and prudent thing to do is to keep some money in our back pocket as we cannot predict exactly what lies ahead. I am also reaffirming our commitment to the clearly defined criteria for spending the money from that fund, which is to provide support for the economy and people in the here and now in response to COVID-19. As a responsible Minister of Finance, I will not be using this fund for political projects that won't be started for a decade at the expense of making sure we are able to invest immediately to protect New Zealanders from a second wave. So to briefly recap, we went hard and early with our economic response to COVID-19 in step with our health response. This means our economy is doing better